My friends, today we have another collection of obscure and rare facts about really the whole theme of this channel, gamer folklore. Lore and stories about players who played, speedrun, and competed in games, particularly of the Nintendo 64 era. And as always, I try to bring up facts that very few people will know and have been unlikely to have been covered in other YouTube videos. So sit back, grab a warm beverage, and here we go.
Here we go!
First, let's quickly address a strange and unusual event that recently took place, and then get into some deep 2001 era lore to carry on with the theme of this video. So you may have heard the name Karl Jobst in the news recently, notably in that he lost a remarkable lawsuit against the one and only gamer of the century, Billy Mitchell. Many are saying they were quite shocked by the outcome, and while I have unique knowledge that really only I know about the history of Karl and Billy and other players on the topic, I'm going to give the situation some time for the dust to settle before sharing my piece on the matter. Now, of course, I won't make drama videos, rather sorts of stories and frankly gamer folklore about the men at the center of the tale, as well as how my own life online was inextricably intertwined with encounters with Karl dating back to the mid-2000s and the late great Apollo legend dating back to around 2017, a man central to the lawsuit. So, with that being acknowledged, here's some quick, deep lore about Karl from a gaming and speedrunning perspective. You see, while the conventional story goes that Billy Mitchell has been gaming and setting video arcade game records for a long time, over 40 years, Karl's gaming career is not too far off in terms of age, coming up on nearly a quarter of a century himself. Did you know Karl, under the pseudonym FAQ God, wrote numerous game FAQ guides in the early 2000s, particularly a legendary one for GoldenEye 007, initially written in August 2000, in which he provides 10 great tips to help beat the game, as well as detailed walkthroughs of all the game's stages. He also wrote FAQs for SimCity 3000, as well as numerous other reviews of notable games from this era. From a speedrunning perspective, Karl's earliest documented untitled record came in Perfect Dark in February 2001 on the stage Deep Sea Agent Difficulty with a time of 2:53. It was a huge time cut using a strategy where the Farsight is able to shoot a further distance on the PAL console than the NTSC console, and this is very helpful in completing one of the main objectives on the stage. Karl, being Australian, had a PAL console and used this to his advantage to cut nearly 20 seconds off the previous record. Now, the game had not even been out for a year yet, so this strategy was truly amazing when it was revealed, and all the fine details of how to play the level were still being sorted out. This 2:53 was just Karl's first successful run with this technique, and with technology being what it was in early 2000, especially when it came to digital video capture, no video was ever made of this time. It wouldn't be until August of that same year when Karl would improve the record to 2:38, in which we do see a video made, captured, and still watchable online thanks to the hard work of speedrunning archivists and historians. The record for Deep Sea Agent all these years later has now been improved to 2:25 by Karl's countryman Jez on July 30th, 2016. But not to be outdone, Karl himself the very next day matched this 2:25, once again showing this great arcing career spanning decades of the man Karl Jobst, who would become infamous in his own right as a YouTuber only years later. This 2:25 has been tied by a handful of other players, and it is truly amazing to see how many influential people have speedrun GoldenEye or Perfect Dark in the elite community at some point, something I would love to get into another time. I think you would all be truly surprised at some of the names who have become known in other fields who have speedrun GoldenEye and Perfect Dark at some point, and it's amazing how well the history has been successfully documented. So, as much as Karl's arch nemesis, Billy Mitchell, had his scores and gaming achievements documented in some regard going back 40 years or so, Karl's not far behind, with his scores and digital footprint going back a quarter of a century. Yeah, I know. We're all feeling old now. My friends, what is Wildwaters Extreme Kayak 64? Well, it's a cancelled video game for the Nintendo 64, and it's too bad because it kinda looks amazing. The footage you're seeing is a partially playable ROM, in this case, recorded by longtime N64 gamer, speedrunner, and archivist Alec Kermit. The game was developed by a company called Looking Glass Studios, who made a handful of games in the 90s, but unfortunately eventually went bankrupt, and thus the kayaking game was never completed. All that remains is this brief one-level bare-bones course before things void out, and there's just nothing left. Now look, I know there are kayak games out there today, games of any racing vehicle one could ever fathom, really, and perhaps this is my out-of-touch, millennial, near-boomerish nostalgia goggles showing, but with only about 300 to 400 games on the N64, each one felt more significant than modern console games today, of which you could find literally tens of thousands of shovelware and slopware in the various eShops and online gaming libraries. So my mind kind of can't help but ponder this lost world we could have had of deeply competitive time trials and speedruns in Extreme Kayak 64. You know, just as we have in Mario Kart or Diddy Kong Racing or other games on the console. After all, the game looks pretty cool, so surely there would have been some fervent competition and incredible world records going back and forth between remarkable gamers? Or would there have been? Here's a counterpoint with a game I'm sure most of you have never heard of. Polaris SnoCross, a game released in the year 2000 for the Nintendo 64, as well as versions for the Game Boy Color and PlayStation 1. It's a racing game where you're driving snowmobiles, ostensibly a kind of promotional game for Polaris brand snowmobiles. It's a reasonable game with some customization choices and vehicle selection, so a little more advanced than just a simple kart racer at the time. There are even 10 courses, which you have to unlock by progressing through various championships in the game. But here's the thing. Have you ever played this game? Probably not. In fact, according to speedrun.com, all the world records are held by one player, GoldenEye, with only a couple others ever having submitted scores at all. I mean, not a single person has ever submitted a score for the Game Boy version. There's this whole game that exists, numerous versions of it, and GoldenEye has even written out various strategy guides and history discussions. Yet you could count on one hand the number of people who have meaningfully played it and submitted scores. Nearly the entire history of the game can be summarized by this. One gentleman, Casey Who, made a detailed video to request the game be added to speedrun.com.
I'm Casey Who, and this is my Polaris SnoCross speedrun.com request video. This is a racing game on the N64.
Leaderboards were then created, which Casey Who filled out by submitting personal record scores on the stages. A few years later, GoldenEye came along and beat all of these scores. The most interesting stage history of the game's 10 stages could be this one called Thunder Bay, in which another player, Gowan N64, briefly took the record from GoldenEye for about 2 days before GoldenEye got it back. And similar happened on the first stage, Bear River, where Modal held the record for 1 day before GoldenEye beat that one too. I mean, really, we've just summarized like 90% of the game's speed lore. And when you compare to the eons and annals of lore in fellow N64 games like GoldenEye, Super Mario 64, Mario Kart 64, and so on, it just really makes you ponder. It's a whole world of competition never really seen, never existed, just a void of nothingness. You know, I think of all the incredible drama and gamer folklore that's been laid bare competing in these other games, and yet in Polaris SnoCross, there's barely anything. I mean, I'm sure these runs by GoldenEye are quite solid, being a competent speed gamer in many other N64 racing games, but that's all that's been written into the record books for Polaris SnoCross. And if this is the case in a full-fledged, legitimately released N64 and PlayStation game from the year 2000, I often just find myself lost in thought about how many video games will see zero or close to zero competition when it comes to speedrunning throughout their entire history, completely or mostly forgotten to time. And it's just amazing to compare them to games like SM64 or GoldenEye, which have seen thousands of competitors and millions of man-hours of attempts, gameplay, deep investigation, decompilation, and numerous other tools combing over every element of the game. And then we just have games like Polaris SnoCross where there's close to nothing. It makes me kind of sad in a way, and thankful that at least there are these runs from GoldenEye, Casey Who, and a couple others, giving this otherwise vacant game some appreciation. Alright, so here's a follow-up to my The World Is Not Enough iceberg with a few more details that have been uncovered or clarified since I posted that video. Here's a completely insane oddity that was brought to my attention in the comments. Apparently among all the multiplayer skins, there's at least one which is just completely broken in multiplayer mode. The Black London Cop skin, who I was told can just clip out of bounds, passing through walls at will. Now, this sounds absolutely ridiculous and unbelievable, so I had to try myself. First, I had to beat King's Ransom on Secret Agent faster than the target time to unlock the security skins code, and then I tried it myself. And yeah, the Black London Cop skin is absolutely broken. You can literally just walk through walls. You can see when fighting AI bot characters, they just don't know what to do once you pass through a wall, with you having disappeared from their point of view. Even weirder is that you can only kind of go a few feet into the wall. It's just enough to disappear from the view of enemies, but you can't just explore boundlessly. You kind of get stuck after moving, say, 6 feet through the wall, which almost makes this weirder. How this happened, why this happened, is just so strange and unusual. Like, what can possibly be going on with the game's engine for this specific character to just be able to phase through walls while most other characters function normally? By the way, I am planning on doing Twine's speed lore, which should be a good 6 episodes going over this history of speedrunning the game, which is a lot more detailed than I initially imagined, so keep your eyes peeled on the speed lore channel for that. Here's another Twine follow-up, thanks to a viewer sending it along. Footage of making one's way onto the Fallen Angel boat, courtesy of viewer Shrimp8 on YouTube. You can really land on it with solid collision and explore pretty much the totality of the structure. It's just very cool to see this footage of a place that I've long looked out upon and pondered, almost like a more niche, more obscure version of GoldenEye's damn secret island. Shrimp mentioned that he thinks the other boat on the stage is not accessible without a working moon jump code, so maybe one day we'll get over there. But in the meantime, a huge thanks to Shrimp for sending along this footage. I'll link the full video in the description. And finally today, here's an unusual and recent clip from fellow GoldenEye content creator Grassloo from his playthrough of the game using a steering wheel controller. Now, if that's not impressive enough, he pretty smoothly beat the entire game 100% with only a handful of deaths. But on Aztec's Secret Agent, when attempting to unlock the double Moonraker laser cheat, he encountered something strange.
From behind? What? Huh? Excuse me? What? That's the first time I've ever seen that guy spawn behind me. How did that happen?
Indeed, upon defeating Jaws, 3 Moonraker guards will start consistently spawning around the stage trying to fight you. So there's not really any restful moments once Jaws is defeated. In this case, one of these guards spawns right behind Grassloo in this particular spot near the last console to launch the shuttle.
From behind? What? Huh? Excuse me?
You can hear just how surprised Grassloo is for this to happen, as there's no actual pad for guards to spawn in at this point. This is actually something him and I could not figure out, and I would call Grassloo one of the most knowledgeable people about GoldenEye as a whole, if not the most knowledgeable. How did the guard spawn here? Could the guard possibly have clipped or warped through time and space to get behind Bond? Usually guards don't spawn at all if you're too close to them, making this even weirder. Could Grassloo's strange R-leaning movement or lookup to the sky have had something to do with it? If I had to guess, I would say yes, but who knows? This doesn't really have any massive impacts on the game, nor speedrun potential really, but it would be interesting to solve the mystery of the spawning guard, who shouldn't have been there. So, there's some deep gamer folklore for you all. I hope you're all staying warm and well. Thanks for watching. Thanks to the Patreons for supporting my work over on Patreon. Stay true, my friends, and I will see you in the next stream, video, or fireside.